Hey everyone, and welcome to my new home theatre. So this has actually taken quite a few years to actually get to this point. Some of you guys, the subscribers to the channel, will remember I've had quite a few different iterations for my home theatre over the years. I did previously do a update for home theatre build, and I did have segmented videos and sort of playlists as I was upgrading the system. But I think this is the first point where I've actually got it to where my original vision was. And that is a 7.2.4 Dolby Atmos home theatre with a 120-inch ultra short throw projector. So in this video, what I'm going to do is just quickly run through all of the equipment, setup and all those kind of things, and then I will have another video for each individual part of the actual system, giving you a breakdown in terms of long-term usage, because that's one thing that I didn't want to do. I didn't want to try and do review videos of products that are intended for long-term usage, and it doesn't really give you a proper idea in terms of what they're like to live with and the durability and things like that. So let's kick things off with the entrance to the home theatre, and this is not necessarily needed, but it's just a little thing that I found. I believe it was on Etsy, where you could just make up these custom signs. So I did have a custom sign made for Asif's home theatre because this applies to everybody in the house. Right, so coming into the home theatre, and what we'll start with is the projection. So for projection, I am still running the Hisense L9G. This is the A12 model, which is the UK model. If you do have the American spec, then as you'll see from my in-depth review of this particular projector, that is very different. That one did come with Dolby Vision, and it did also come with filmmaker mode. The UK spec doesn't come with that. It comes with a separate proprietary Vida TV operating system and a few other changes as well. But overall, long-term usage, so I've had this roughly probably for a couple of years now, and it's actually been flawless in terms of its performance. It's very difficult to actually capture on video, especially using smartphones, because one thing I've noticed is with all of the Hisense projectors, whenever you capture them with a smartphone, it always adds a red hue, which I can sort of mitigate using my Sony camera, but you don't actually see any of that in real life. And the one sort of downside I would say is if it's not used for quite a while and you first turn it on, occasionally on the sort of black letterbox bar scenes, you might see a slight bit of red hue, but as soon as the content kicks in, because the image is so bright and vivid, you don't really notice it anymore. It kind of just blends away. Similarly with any sort of little imperfections in terms of black floor level, you don't necessarily notice it during content, especially during 16:9 content, because it does fill the whole screen. But even during letterbox bars, scenes and things like that for movies, because the image is so bright, it kind of just blends away. Usage wise, I have been using it with a smart remote, so I've not really needed to use the original remote, and I don't really use any of the built-in apps or anything like that. I do use external players, so I'm literally just using this as a projector, and for that it has been pretty flawless. I think maybe once or twice during the whole usage I've had it where I've turned it on and it's had some sort of a bug during the startup and it's switched back off, but even just leaving it for 10 seconds and then turning it back on resolved that issue, and I've never had that since. I think that only happened twice. In terms of the noise of the projector, it's not too bad. Occasionally it will wind up into a sort of turbo mode and it will produce a little bit more noise, but that's very, very rare, and that's only on the hottest days when the room is actually so hot that we're all kind of struggling, let alone the projector itself. Normally with the way that I've got it set up with the audio levels, you can't actually hear that or any of the other devices in the setup until I actually go to turn things off. So alongside with the L9G, it does come with its own screen. The screen itself has been pretty good. It is a 0.4 gain screen, so it is decreasing the brightness of any white image in order to give you a better black level. And for the most part, this isn't an issue. For sports and things like that, I can use it like this with the curtains open. For movies or any actual content, generally I will close the curtains because I do want a blacked out room. It's only in 16:9 and sort of sports content where you've got really bright and vivid image where you can get away with having the curtains open. For anything where there is dark scenes, you can't really use these types of projectors, especially not with my room layout because it's sideways light. If this light was coming from the top, it would probably perform a little bit better, but with sideways light, it can't deflect that light as well because it is a CLR, so ceiling light rejecting screen. But it does a pretty decent job, and for the most part, if I needed to, I can use this with the curtains open and view most content. Right, coming on to the audio side of things. So first thing we'll touch on is the AVR. So I am running the Marantz SR8015. I've had this for similarly maybe a year and a half, coming up to 2 years, something like that. I can't remember the exact date when I got it, but once again, it's worked pretty flawlessly. It does have one bug, and that is if I turn the projector on specifically in the port that I've got my media player connected to, and then I switch it to the 8K port, which is where I have my Apple TV connected, then it will just give you a screen full of static and you'll have to turn the thing off and back on. Easy workaround. So whenever I'm using just the Apple TV, I'll just turn it on using the Apple TV, and whenever I want to use any other device, I just turn it on using one of those other devices, and then I can switch between them without any issues. Audio wise, obviously it does come with its own built-in Odyssey software, and I have also installed the additional app, which I think was around about £30. It was an extra paid app, and that just gives you the functionality of, whereas the built-in Odyssey calibration only gives you 2 saved presets, with the additional app you can basically create as many as you like, and you can have different profiles saved and upload them to the Marantz as and when you need them. For the most part, I only use it for movies and general content. I don't really do 2-channel listening, so for me it isn't really that big of an issue. But where it does come in handy is, say for example I wanted 2 profiles, one with the curtains open and one with them closed. I can have both of those saved on the actual Marantz, as well as having additional profiles saved as well. The calibration itself, it does give you the option to go in and tweak things. I haven't necessarily done that much, and because I've only very recently got it set up in the way that I wanted it, it meant that I've not run it as many times over the years as I probably wanted to, but it does a pretty decent job in terms of accounting for the irregularities of the room and compensating a little bit for that. Talking about the room, I have, as you can see, got quite a lot of acoustic panels on the walls. This did help to dampen down a lot of the echo. I do still get quite a bit whenever I run the calibration software. I do notice that there is quite a bit of echo that does bounce around, but it is massively improved, and compared to how it was originally, it's made a night and day difference. Some people do say you don't want the room dampened down too much, but what I found is that because I generally use it with either the Dolby Atmos or the Auro 3D profiles, it does mean that you get much better localization of where the sound is coming from, rather than having too many reverberations around the room. The one thing I still do need to do is something about that back corner back there, where you do still get a lot of boominess there, just because of how the room is located, and I have sort of compensated that with the extra sub, but I do still probably need to do something about that. Overall, the AVR has been really good. It works pretty flawlessly, and I've got no complaints in terms of power and how it runs as well. So I've never had it shut down on me. I've never had any issues like that. In terms of video processing, all that kind of stuff, it's been pretty flawless, and the sound quality is really, really good from the actual processor as well. Okay, so alongside the Marantz, I am also running the AC Infinity. I believe this is the T10 model. So this is just sat on top of the AVR, and this basically just sucks up the heat and blows it out the front in order to keep it cool. Because I've only installed this since I've rearranged the room, I've not really come to any really hot days, so I'm not 100% sure on what I want to set the temperature to, but at the moment I believe I've got it set to 27 degrees Celsius. So it normally kicks in a few degrees before that, and as soon as it hits 27 degrees, it'll kick up the fans to whatever level I choose. So at the moment I've only got it set to about half, and then once you turn the AVR off, it'll keep spinning those fans gradually until it cools down to roughly around about between 2 and 4 degrees below the target temperature. So in my case, whenever it drops to around 23, 22 degrees, that's when it's completely off, and anything above that, it'll slowly wind up in order to keep that heat down as much as possible. So alongside the AVR, obviously we have to come on to the speakers. So in terms of speakers, I am running the OSD Black Series, OSD Mark II Black Series. So that is the center channel. The left and right channels, I believe they're like S80, S81s and S82s, and then the side surrounds are all matching OSD Black Series speakers as well. The center channel is very, very powerful, so it has dual 8-inch woofers and triple tweeters, and the left and right channels have a single 8-inch woofer and triple tweeters. All of these surrounds, so I have side surrounds and rear surrounds, they both have a single 8-inch woofer and a single tweeter. All of these perform really well. Having all the speakers matched means that whenever the audio inside whatever content you're watching moves around the room, it is matched, so it does move quite seamlessly and you're never taken out of the content because of that. I do also have matching OSD Black Atmos speakers. Obviously they're not the exact same type. These ones are the 6-inch because the overall footprint is a 8-inch footprint. If I did go for matching 8-inch Atmos speakers, then it would have made around about 10-inch holes, which I didn't really want to go that much, and this all came as a package deal for, and I was literally the first person in the UK to actually get these particular types of speakers. Overall, I've got no complaints with these speakers. Even though they're not full range, I can compensate for the sort of frequency range using my subs. The audio is very crisp, very clear, and very powerful. That was the biggest thing that really hit me, is just how much impact you get from all of these speakers, regardless of whether it's the center channel, the sides, or the rears. It gives you that same punch even from the mid-range, which you don't necessarily want to be dipping down into your subs for, because you still want that direction from the actual speakers themselves. The Atmos speakers do a pretty decent job, but I don't think I've got them fully set up and dialed in just yet. I do still need to tweak them slightly, but I did want to try and get them, as much as I did try to get them focused for the main listening position, I'd also want everybody else to benefit from it as well. So I didn't dial it fully in. I did try and just have it roughly angled towards where I am sat now. So alongside the speakers, we come on to one of the biggest parts of the actual system, which is the subwoofers, and these are the Monolith M15 V2s. So these are 1000 watt RMS subwoofers, and after a long time I finally managed to actually get hold of a second one and make this system how I wanted it. So all along I did want two subwoofers. I wasn't sure originally whether I was going to put one at the front and one at the back. That probably would balance out the room better, but obviously the dimensions of the room means that I can't really do that. In order to achieve this, I also had to get a different media console, and that meant changing up the room quite a bit. Originally I did want to make a custom media console, and I probably will do that in the long run. For the short-term gap, I just wanted something, and I didn't have the time, and the UK weather doesn't allow me to have a period where I can actually design and custom make a media console to what my requirements would be, but this does a pretty decent job in the meantime. The subs themselves, I've got them turned way down. I have tuned them to reference level, so it goes from between 85 and 115 decibels, I believe it is, and the speakers go from 75 up to 105 decibels. All of these I've ran through the calibration software, so it has tweaked them slightly, but if I wanted to, I could also go in on each individual sub and tune them accordingly. One thing I did find is, because the right hand sub, as I'm looking at it, is newer, it isn't quite bedded in exactly the same, so it was slightly lower, so that is roughly playing about 1 dB higher than the left hand sub. With the calibration software, it does tone match both of them, and it basically equalizes them out. I believe when the calibration software ran, it did actually put them at -6, and that's with each sub set to THX mode in extended and with automatic on off. So it does have a few options, so you can set the gain manually or set it to THX. I've got both of them set to THX, and then you can also have the THX range for the actual frequency, or you can go to extended. The extended dips down to below 10 Hertz with in-room gain, and that's what I've got it set to, and got no complaints. I have been using these in fully ported mode. I believe if you do have one port plugged, then that does give you the best performance in terms of frequency range, but I just prefer the sound and the extra volume that you get from having all the ports open. I do occasionally play about with these settings, but generally I will run both of these with all ports open. Okay, so coming on to the media devices that I've got. So first up is the Apple TV 4K. So this, I believe, is the 3rd gen. It's the latest one that Apple released, and it's an Apple TV. So it does everything that you need it to do, apart from 7.1 true audio. So for anything where I'm just streaming content, or if it's for anything like IPTV or anything like that, I will generally use the Apple TV for that kind of content. And for everything else, wherever I'm playing back any downloaded content or saved content, I will use the Zidoo player. So they are my two devices, the Apple TV 4K and the Zidoo Z9X. So this is the non-pro version. This is just the original Z9X. I believe quite a lot of people have had the Z9X Pro and also the newer devices, and they're locked down a lot more, so they don't allow you to do things like install APKs or change the skin that's on them. Whereas the Z9X, for me, if you have a NAS drive, then that is the perfect device for playback if you don't want onboard storage on the actual device itself. So this one, you can plug in USB drives, you can plug in SATA drives, but it doesn't have no built-in hard drive. And for me, for my usage, that is just perfect. In terms of playback, the Apple TV is obviously flawless, and it is the best experience of any media box I've ever used. Whereas the Zidoo is not quite as polished, but the experience that it gives you, I think for movies, is actually better. And it has a few little tweaks that I've done to it as well that you can see on the individual playlist for that particular device. Overall, out of the two, if I had the choice, I always play back content on the Zidoo, but for streaming I would always refer to the Apple TV. So in order to access all of that content that I've got for the Zidoo, I do also have a NAS drive. So this is the Synology DS418 Play, I believe, that I've got. And the main reason I went for this particular one is it gives you 4 bays, so you can go up to, I believe, 16 terabytes per bay. I'm only using 2 bays at the moment, and I don't have it in a RAID formation, so I've not really got any redundancy, but because of what I'm using on there, generally I do tend to delete and move stuff around quite a bit, so it's not been an issue so far. I will probably add additional 16 terabyte bays in the future just to give me some redundancy. The other reason I went for this particular one was I wanted to be able to run my HomeKit applications via Homebridge, and I do have separate videos on that. Alongside the Zidoo, this works perfectly because I have got it set up so then, for example, when I play content on the Zidoo, it will automatically turn off lights, turn off the LEDs, turn on the air purifier in the room, things like that. And when I pause it, it does the reverse. So it will turn on lights, turn on the LEDs so you can see where you're going if you want to just grab a quick snack. And also when I fully turn off the Zidoo, it will also turn on the room light, turn off any LEDs, and go into a sort of sleep mode after sunset. That is also timed depending on whether it's during the day or in the evening, and all of these things are enabled by having a NAS drive that has Homebridge running on it, and that just gives me extra functionality. I do quite enjoy messing around with all those tweaks, but they can be quite annoying when they go wrong. So for most of these devices that I've got, I've installed a older version and I've never updated them, because whenever I update them they always seem to break and I have to go in and redo all of these sort of automations I've got. Okay, so alongside all of the sort of hardware for the visual and audio experience, one of the other main things is your seating. And as you can see behind me, I do have the Valencia Tuscany edition seats, and I've had these for well over a year now, so probably going on to 16 to 18 months now. For the most part, they've been pretty good. In terms of the rear bench, that is the row of 3, so that has the center seat that drops down, so the outside 2 give you full recline functionality, and the center seat folds down with its own tray table and reading lights. So for the front, I've got the traditional Tuscany leather edition seats, and with these I have had a replacement for this particular seat that I'm sat on, and that was because the cushioning on this particular seat just completely disintegrated on me. In terms of comfort, so you do have full recline, you have adjustable headrests, and you also have lumbar support. The lumbar support for me was imperative because I do find that I do suffer from low back problems if I do tend to binge watch a TV show, or if you watch a couple of really long movies back to back, or whenever I'm watching football and you can end up watching 2 or 3 games in a row. Overall, the seats have performed really well though, and given even that one slight downside with the seat that did go wrong, Valencia were pretty good in terms of how they replaced it. They just sent out a complete replacement seat. Since then, obviously I've had no real big issues with them. Being full leather, it does mean that they do hold up really well, and they are really easy to clean as well. Generally the usage in this room is not that much, so they don't really get caked in dirt or anything. It's more just dust and a wipe down every now and then. Occasionally we've had friends and family around and we've had popcorn and drinks and stuff spilt on them, but that does clean up way easier on real leather than it would on any type of fabric, or even from, in my experience, the sort of faux leather that you do tend to get with other manufacturers as well. At the time I purchased these, Valencia didn't sell any of their newer models, so the ones where you don't have the headrests folded up all the time. Some of their newer ones that are more designed for audio, I would have actually preferred them, because the one thing that I did notice since getting these, and you can see I did have to raise both of my rear speakers because they were getting blocked out by the higher back on these seats. The one change that I would make would be to get seats where the headrest only folds up when you want it, and that way you get much more immersive audio compared to what I do have right now. Right now what I do have to do is crank up the gain on those rear speakers a little bit more, and what I do is I match everything to my seating position, so I get everything set to 75 decibels at where I'm sat, and that obviously does mean whoever's sat at the back will end up with slightly louder audio compared to what I'm getting sat in my position, compared to if the seats didn't have such a high back. It's a small downside, and it's one of those things where obviously there's always pros and cons of all the seating. These, by having that higher back, it does give you more support, but is the downside in terms of the audio, that you don't get as good audio as a result. Another sort of little touch of the room is all of the lighting. So I have got LED lighting in various places throughout the room. So I have got it around the screen, I've got it along the floor on all sides of the room, and I do also have it in the media console itself. The Valencia seats themselves do have built-in LEDs, but they're pretty much useless because as soon as you recline, it will just shine forwards. With the rear seats, because I did raise them using longer feet, so I believe on the rear seats I've got between an 8 or 10 inch riser on them, and with that, even when you're sat in the rear seats, with the front seats not even reclined, you can still see the very bottom of the screen, and that's basically what I wanted it. I did originally intend to create a platform for it, but the amount of work that would have been needed was too time intensive, so I just went for the faster option, which was to add additional feet to the bottom of them. They're nice and sturdy this way, and it does give me a little bit of extra hidden storage, whereas the other way I wouldn't have had that. With those rear seats, because they are lifted, I was able to move the LEDs so that they face down rather than forwards. Being completely honest, as soon as these side LEDs come on, because they are so bright, you can't really see the built-in seats LEDs. Those rear seats, because they are completely blocked out by these front seats, means that they can actually keep their LEDs on all the time if they wanted to, but generally they won't need to, because whenever we pause the content, the LEDs come on and they can see whatever they need to see anyway. Another thing is, because obviously when the content kicks in, the screen is quite bright, it does light up the rest of the room quite a bit. Not enough to where you can see stuff clearly, that's why I do have all the additional LEDs for whenever we're going in and out the room, but enough to be able to see where your cup holder is, for example, or if you want to just grab a snack. The final sort of piece of hardware that I've got in the room is a air purifier. So this was a review unit that was sent to me by Airversa. It still performs perfectly fine, but the display on it has failed. I'm not sure why, because nobody's ever dropped anything on it, and it's always been kept in the shade because of the location that it's kept in as well. But for whatever reason, the sort of pixels on the display have failed. It still works perfectly fine, and the good thing is, because it's Matter enabled, it links into HomeKit, and because of that, I've been able to get it to work with the Zidoo player. So whenever I play content, it will automatically come on, and whenever I turn the projector off, it will automatically turn that off. This is just to make sure that during a movie, it's got a little bit of air circulation, and it just keeps the room purified a little bit better, because whenever this room's not used, because of the amount of furnishings in the room with soft, thick pile carpet and obviously the polyester fiber acoustic panels on the walls, it means that there is always quite a bit of dust in this room, and that just helps to suck out some of that dust and keep the room a little bit better in terms of the air purity. The final thing that I'm working on, but I haven't really come up with a solution for yet, is the curtains, and I am trying to come up with some sort of automatic curtains that will close and open depending on what time of day it is and what type of content you're playing as well. So whenever we play a movie, I would get them to close fully, and whenever I'm playing just sports, they would only close halfway, because that's generally how I tend to have it. I will close one side of the curtains halfway, and that's more to cut out the glare on my eye rather than actually affecting the screen. The screen is still fine, and you'll be able to see the content perfectly fine. It's more just because when that glare is coming from the bay window, it tends to shine straight into the corner of your eyes, and it creates glare more on your eyeballs compared to the actual screen itself. So overall, my thoughts on where we're at the moment. So it's almost fully finished now, so there's still one or two little things that I would always want to do. The cabling, I've done my best to actually tidy that up, and I'll have a separate video on that, but there's still one or two little bits of mobs that I need to do. But overall, I think this is almost there. It's almost fully finished, and it's at a point where when I started this, I didn't think I would get to this level of what I've ended up with. So 7.2.4, 15-inch subs, really powerful speakers, audio that is crystal clear whilst being powerful and extremely loud when you want it to be, Atmos that is real and gives you that effect way more than any sort of deflected or bounced audio as I used to have with the soundbars. And yeah, the seating is just a final touch, and it gives you that full movie experience. We do tend to have Fridays and Saturday nights or evenings as movie nights, and that's a sort of tradition in the household now, where we know that every Friday and every Saturday we can get together regardless of what's been going on during the week, and we can watch a movie or a series together. And especially for the series, because you can't experience them in the cinemas, this is perfect for that. In fact, since installing this, I've actually stopped going to cinemas completely, because the experience that I get, especially on the audio side, is such a downgrade in the cinemas in comparison to what I have here. In the cinemas, obviously the equipment that they have have is probably far advanced in terms of what I have here. They're probably using line array for the most part, but because they have to customize for so many different seating positions, you're never getting that audio that is pinpoint accurate for every seat. Another downside of cinemas in comparison to a home theater is you will never get rear audio, whereas in a home theater you can actually set that up. In most cinemas you will get side surround and you will get Atmos, but it's very rare that you will ever get rear audio in a cinema, whereas that's something that I can experience at home. Obviously you do still need the correct source, so you still do need 7.1 audio source, otherwise it is only utilizing your side speakers. It's not utilizing those rear speakers unless you switch it into Auro 3D, which sort of mimics what the side speakers are doing, and it extends that audio to the rears and also your Atmos speakers as well. So final thoughts, I am really pleased with where I've got this to. There's no big upgrades planned, and anything that I do to the room will just be small tweaks, user experience improvements, where it just makes things easier or makes things more automated in order to improve the user experience. There's no real hardware that I would need to change. Obviously in the future I would probably like to upgrade to the newer Marantz AVRs or processors, but at this point I don't need to. I am planning on doing individual videos, updated videos on each individual part of this system, so stay tuned for those. There probably will be quite a while because I do have quite a lot going on with the channel, as you could probably see from the uploads more recently, and I am trying my best to upload more regularly because obviously that's what you guys subscribe for. So for all of those that just stumble across my videos, it really does help the channel out, especially when it comes to collaborations and finding new products for review, if I do have more subscribers and especially more views. So if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos, and it really helps the video if you can also give this video a thumbs up as well. And until the next one, thanks very much for watching.